want you to know, and choosing children gets a lot of more shit and not who like you want you to a little bit like in the now. The other kids open your high, Jenny and what you like, we've been here for maybe 6 weeks, and so but we feel very at home here in Georgia. We are and so it's been good to be with family and then also extended family like Victory. Through our family, we've heard so much about this church here, how warm it is, and how he's been a great friend, and so we miss him, and I know his children are still here, and so very excited about our family being here. And though we're probably gonna just to get to know other ones, but probably we're gonna end up here, and so I want you to you guys have been so patient, and you've been waiting for the next pastor, and we've been praying for you, and so you guys have done a great job. And my wife and I, Linda, and we have a son, Abraham, he's 12, and then a daughter, Sarah, she's 8. And so invite our children. They would love to join and be a part of that. They don't speak Hmong, but I think it'll be okay. Do you all speak Hmong? Okay, all right. They'll fit in with you. Their haircut is just like your haircuts too, and so they'll fit in. I'm really excited because I know that you guys are. You've been waiting for a long time. As this week I was preparing for God's Word, I was led to talk about the importance of transition. Our family, we're transitioning. So I hope that my message today can help you personally. But I also hope that it will encourage the church in this season. You're entering into a new season. So the title of my message this morning is Moving from One Season to the Next. Moving from one season to the next. Long Indu Mudo Indu. Long Indu Mudo Indu. And this morning I don't want to just talk about a new pastor, although that's a big part of this next season. But I want to ask a deeper question for us. What kind of people will we be in this next season? Every season, there's a question that you have to answer. When you move from one place to another, from one relationship to another, from one time to another, you have to ask the question, will we trust God enough to say yes to whatever He's inviting us to? The bay yalu and Gunyang e mudo Beshanon idea. Mo inu Yonatha I don't do law or Gana de Joying with Jadia. Ukla ho ya philosophy Luying Mu. The Shi Yonatha chi Kedosa u the Woyansi or Jan Jendon Yaho, Gacha, Donsi, Jiaboku, the Lunjong, Minigilong, or Yachi de the Lunjong. Sao cho tôi cho một cái là đi trong một lần. Từ bỏ thơ lo or nào lúc cho a phô ya ahia or ya ahi tu tin lo ikan bầu ikan bầu theo ahi tu ya finaha tu theo ya eli senzu eli ya từ bỏ thơ lo or tu chữ để hậu lũ nhỏ hậu luôn trong xì lòng. Cho tôi cho chỉ bảo địa Jonathan tôi mù lại. The Lunda Mikama Oya or Yanato gỡ làm một trong đời cho philosophy lưu yên. Một ở tụ ye je la je joklia. Itu nhỏ ishake. Itu hua bause. Thế itu hua sene. Itu nhỏ cho shakpe tìm một trong lúc trong Mikama. Thế itu nhớ chán đã tìm một trong đã luôn trong game bằng. 因为他还做都罗我干的就应我找的呀，这里拉不着的叫菲拉斯。我只我给该kia这路线，带着都只有把要你把给应有只么的只是到你个只不应，只要二零四了，有可应，都落带的，这个有我的只了，古应有这个话。被台湾去给，完全了解做个造路啊，我哋不但个做开转系你莫线样，你只要啲能受接是的就完全啲要个我把个车从完全被个户个啲能受接的，然后完全被公交站，路线而被来年个走路呢，他完全个就完全就被个户了个被到个走路的是完全个被莫。在经济，我个地好路，要到好路些路上的呢，在通普人在那湾区，在这里讨的太多的区是路的路上更高。Amen. This morning, I want to talk about three different opportunities or three different responses to divine opportunities. What happens when there's a divine opportunity, a change of season? How do you respond? There's three responses that I want to talk about this morning. The first response is Saul's response to divine opportunity. You might have to help me. I'm a little bit slow. Thank you. Saul, 我哩讲抓路西河，我们去下湖。别个说Saul 我得说 3,000 years ago, Saul became the first king of a tiny nation. There's a little bit of history. They were surrounded by scary, scary nations, people like the Philistines. And years ago, the National Geographic they actually released an article about the Philistines, and they discovered all the mass grave sites that the Philistines created. They killed people and then they buried them in mass graves. The National Geographic described them as havoc-wreaking people. And these are the kinds of people that Saul and Jonathan, they stared in the face every single day when they woke up. And they had to ask themselves, do we give into our fear? Do we let fear take over? And that's what they asked themselves. And for most of us, that's what you wake up every morning asking yourselves as well. When you go to work, when you go to school, do I let fear take over my life? This is the reality that they lived in. From the very beginning, the Israelites, even as a tiny nation, they were being challenged. Did they let nations like the Philistines scare them so that they don't live out the purpose of their kingdom? I want you to understand that if the Philistines win, there is no nation of Israel. And if there's no nation of Israel, there is no Jesus. That's what's at stake in 1 Samuel chapter 14. And so this is the importance of this passage this morning. And so Saul lived in fear. As a matter of fact, it wasn't the Philistines that were the greatest threat to the Israel. It was Saul's fear that was the greater threat to Israel. Sometimes our fear is the bigger threat than our problems. The things that are happening in your life is not so much the problem that you have that is the greater threat, but it might be the fear that you're experiencing. That is the greater threat to the mission and what God is doing in your life. Chapter 13, all right, let me advance that. So that's something if you want to tweet, you can tweet some of these things. But chapter 13 explains that Saul keeps staring at the scary impossibility called the Philistines. And it drained Saul's courage away. We didn't read this earlier, but I'll read it in 1 Samuel chapter 13. It says, when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, all right, you might have to help me here. I don't know where I'm at on the slides. So I'm at 1 Samuel chapter 13, and we'll kind of move along here. It says in 13, when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, The people hid themselves in caves, in holes, in rocks, in tombs, and cisterns. And some Hebrews crossed the fords of Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. And Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him, trembling. They khajit khachua, they kijeki chua, la shi ho, they kha a, te ho, they khachi. Mo itia to kia la to de yula de, mototi, ga, tien gile, kengcha ala. Saul took his eyes off of God. He took his eyes off of the mission, and he obsessed at how strong the enemy was. And not only did he think this way, but he led the Israelites this way. And when you lead in fear, the people you lead will live in fear. Even if you appear to be a confident leader, you know that the temptation to give into fear is very big. There's that, you understand that? And Saul's fear meant that he lost a lot of people. And the ones that stuck around, they were afraid, just like him. As a spiritual leader, you have to lead by the Holy Spirit and lead by the Word of God. Not just emotions, not just intellect, not just talent or skill. Saul thought that he couldn't win, and so he panicked. And because Saul panicked, his team panicked. His army, think about this, his army was 3,000 people. But by the time the Philistines came near, they all left, and there were only 600 left. And it wasn't because the Philistines were so strong, but it was because Saul multiplied fear. In fact, some of Saul's army, they actually took their weapons and they left the Israelites and they joined the Philistines. They did a Kevin Durant move. They left the Israelites and they joined the team that they thought was going to win. And so you know what Saul's plan was? He does the thing that a leader should never do when they're in trouble. Saul did the exact opposite of what leaders should do whenever you're in a situation you can't handle. Saul took his team, and on the day of battle, they went into a cave and they hid. They hid themselves. It says, that was Saul's response. Let me challenge you, especially if you're in a leader or in a position of leading, and this could be in your home, and this could be at school, could be here at the church, that when a difficult assignment comes your way this year, that you don't only just stare at the face of your Philistine assignment, that scary thing that's in front of you, but you partner with God so that you can stare down and so that you don't hide in a cave. When facing the impossibility, you're going to want to regroup, and it's that fear, it's the flight, fear or flight response. You're going to want to go into a cave. You're going to want to sleep in your bedroom for days. I know as teenagers that are dealing with anxiety, it's tempting to withdraw and to hide. You want to re-strategize against the Philistine and never come out. But you have to choose. You have to come to a moment where you choose to focus on the mission that God's called you to, and the truth that God speaks over to you, and the mighty presence that God is with you, that God is with you. You have to choose those things, to believe in those things. That kind of courage doesn't come from just your talent or your giftedness, or it doesn't come from your discipline. It comes from God's promise, it comes from God's purpose, and it comes from God's presence that's in your life. Saul lacked that, but Jonathan had that. What was Jonathan's response to divine opportunity? What did Jonathan do? What did Jonathan do? To Jonathan, God was bigger than the Philistines. God was bigger than the problem. One morning, Jonathan was so tired of living in the cave with his dad. He realized that his dad wasn't going to do something. His dad's King Saul. And so he looked at his sidekick, his armor bearer, and he said, hey, it's time. We got to go. We got to take the ship, and we got to go in the ocean, and we got to go see what's on the other side. Jonathan had this holy initiative, this conviction. He wasn't seeking status or power. He wasn't trying to be the next king. As a matter of fact, you know who's the next? It was supposed to be Jonathan, but do you know who ended up being the king after Saul? David, Jonathan's best friend. See, Jonathan wasn't looking for status or power. He just wanted God's people to not live in fear and to live into the mission of God. If the church cannot fulfill its mission, if it's hiding. It's impossible for us to do the things that God's called us to do, whether that's here in Metro Atlanta or in the United States or in Thailand or throughout the world. You cannot fulfill your mission if we live in hiding. And hiding is not physical. Sometimes hiding is saying we don't have enough. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough talents or treasure. These are other kinds of caves that sometimes we hide in or hide behind. The mission is not growing a church. The mission is not balancing the budget. The mission is not gaining a new pastor. These are the means for mission. But the mission is what we sang earlier before. It's becoming more like Jesus so that we can bring all of Jesus to all of the world. As a matter of fact, I think that's our Alliance mission statement. It's bringing all of Jesus to all of the world. That is our mission, to be more like Jesus so that we can bring more of Jesus to all of the world. A faithful pastor, like they will come and help us to lead in that mission. But it is every member's job to be participating in that mission. We can't hide in the cave in this next season. My prayer is that God will give all of us, you, the conviction to live out that calling and to not hide in the cave. Pray that God kick us out of the cave. What do you want for our church? What do you want for our season? What do you want for the Hmong church? What do you want for what God is doing through the Hmong church in America? Pray that God would kick us out of our season. Maybe our season is the last 45 years that we've been in the United States, and God is saying, think about the next 45 years that you're in the United States. Maybe this is the season that we're in. Jonathan and Saul, they were in the same exact situation, but Jonathan had a different outlook. He didn't see that the outcome was success or failure. He saw that the outcome was obey or disobey. That's how he thought. He didn't think success or failure. He thought obey or disobey. In verse 6, we read earlier, this is what Jonathan is saying. He says, come, let us go to the garrison of the uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. He doesn't sound very confident, but he says, Jonathan knows there is no guarantees. There is no guarantees. He is not 100% sure of the outcome. Whenever you're doing the will and the work of God, you will never feel 100%. But if you ever need to know 100% before you do something that God calls you to do, you're not looking for a relationship with God. You're looking for like a crystal ball. You know what a crystal ball is? It gives you the answer, yes or no. And that's not how God functions. God is not a crystal ball. More than a sure thing, our faith in the Bible points us to a sure person. It is always about the relationship before it is about the result. Jonathan knows this. He says, I think we should do this. I remember Peng was explaining we were planting a church in Chicago, and there was no guarantee that the church would work, and we would still say, I think we should do this. In the pandemic. I think God's going to show up. Whether or not we have weapons, when Saul is saying we don't have enough weapons, he knows they don't have the resources to overcome the Philistines. It's like our basketball team here in Atlanta. You don't have enough. You don't have enough. The Falcons don't have enough either. But there's this naive, belief that maybe it could happen. That was the reality that Jonathan knew about the situation. But he also had a courage underneath. It wasn't naive. It wasn't like it wasn't that he was cocky, but it was that he had faith. He's not saying that I'm better than my dad's chicken. He's not saying that. His courage is humble because it comes from a relationship with God, not a result of being a leader. But he does have this it may be. He actually says that, right? It might, maybe the Lord might. It wasn't this guarantee. It was this humble knowing that if God doesn't show up, this isn't going to work out. And that is the faith part of entering into a season that you're not sure what the next few years look like. You need to have a little bit of that. It's the theology of courage. Human courage says, I can do this because I have strength and I have talent and I have strategy and I have the ability to do it. Biblical courage is this, I don't know if I can. And that's a biblical way to understand faith. The church cannot fulfill its mission if it is hiding. God is giving some of you assignments this year that you will need to rely on God 100% in order to fulfill that. And that's going to develop inside of you this courage. It may be that the Lord will work this out. And it will be because God has a great purpose and a great reason for why he is handing you this assignment. That assignment might not be a church ministry. Maybe it's not maybe it's in your family. Maybe it's it's just for you. And you're going to need here. And my prayer is that once you I want to talk about the armor bearer's response, the third person's response to divine opportunity. I love the armor bearer's response. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of Peng Zhong. This might be you, okay? I don't want to campaign for Peng Zhong too much. You guys might give me too much ministry work to do in the church. But verse 7, listen to what the armor bearer says. He's saying this to Jonathan. He says, Jonathan, do whatever's in your heart. Do as you wish, because I am with you, heart and soul. He says, I'm with you. As a matter of fact, when Jonathan turns to the armor bearer to say, man, we can't stay here. We got to go to battle. I almost see the armor bearer smile. He's like, I've been waiting for somebody to have courage. That phrase, I am with you, heart and soul. Original. It's actually saying that my heart is the same heart as your heart. Your decision resonates with me. Your courage resonates with me. You're calling something out of me. Do you know anybody like that? Do you know anybody like that right now? Most people, own up to their God-given assignment until they're around other people who are also owning up to their assignment. That's how it works usually. Is that you only have the courage to do it when other people are stepping in and having the courage to do it themselves. If we are around fearful, half-hearted, distracted people, you'll always be waiting for the next assignment. You let them go. When you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. 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 But when you're around those who have courage that say, we have to do this, then it begins to call you to be courageous. You're like, oh, I know that sound. Like that guy is saying something, or she is saying something that is wakening something up inside of me. When you give a Jonathan-like response to an assignment, you will see other people wake up to their assignment as well. She came from a family that didn't, they were not Christians at all. Her whole entire family. And so she mong day when you get to date the church who for no it was about maybe 11:30 at night. You're losing the story now that I'm doing Hmong, but it's a really good story about a girl that we had led to Christ. She didn't come from a Christian background, and she was going to get baptized on Sunday, and the night before she called us up and she said, hey, my mom says that if I get baptized, then she's going to disown me. Maybe not so much today that she probably each day the learn much more like that now. Mom who told her I don't know the back yet in the young walk get or day in the young like that now. And so, but yeah, we tie you had it Liga like you who can you got it, can you salad and who did the she. The bunch of chocolate share, like you got walking cat or day, yeah, the Ganya like that, yeah, Uluchi, coming on. So the next morning, we didn't know if she was going to get baptized or not. We told her that, hey, if you get kicked out of your house, then you can live with us. And so we went to church, and she showed up to church, and we had the privilege of baptizing her. And being child in the thank you, Shazan, and to try to get me into the shit that we got out in JG Sula, and the Yoy Kikato Day. Yet the Tamu Jenny and Gionola, and they get the Gianni Jihunia, she knew food watching them. And into the shell and they get back and they get in Shala, and they look at check it, they walk Kikato Day, and they get being Ike done John Shia, Ike done in China. We were afraid. We were big in China, big for Bloma, the Pop they get Monchain. We were afraid that what if we get in trouble and then there is more lawsuits against our church, those kinds of things. She went back home and she didn't say anything to her. And she told her mom that Mama got baptized this morning. And I still love and respect you, but I'm following Jesus. And it wasn't too long after that she had a need in her life. And the giver had at the entire and so for the dog got a bad joy in how to big Jim with how much you put on it. And the Ghana get inside a good job and they are a great witness in their family right now, even till this day. But it reminded me that most people don't own up to their God-given assignment until they're around other people who have courage. And then, as a church Victory, we need to be that for other people. You're going to need to be that for and you need courageous people. Country now, and so we need sunshine. This really is young, and they're going to do great. I think they're going to do a great job. Once you but she like you need it's more gay or shelter she law the ministry and likewise and some of you are going to awaken to your purpose. This may be the time in this season where some of your children, some of you the end of the story is pretty remarkable because it gives us the bigger picture of what's happening. The basic premise of the story isn't so much that Jonathan and the armor bearer beat the Philistines. They actually don't win. They climb the mountain, and the Philistines see these two guys climbing the mountain, and they never thought that the Israelites would have the courage to challenge them, and they begin to freak out. Because they actually think, oh, maybe the Israelites have found the courage to battle with us. And so the Philistines freak out. And then, instead of a battle happening, God sends an earthquake. And the earthquake is actually what makes the Philistines think, wow, the Israelites must have this big army. And the Philistines actually chicken out for that battle. And it reminds us that biblical courage cooperates with God. All God needed was a little bit of your courage, because he had an earthquake coming behind your courage. The bigger work is always God. The earthquake is always God's work to do. All we have to do is have the courage to climb the mountain. When they saw that the Philistines, or the Jonathan and armor bearer were coming, it says in verse 22, it says, likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines were now fleeing, they then followed after them in battle. I want you to understand that Jonathan and the armor bearer, it wasn't that they won the battle. The major thing that Jonathan and the armor bearer did was they cooperated with God so that those who were scared would come out of hiding. Those who were scared saw Jonathan and the armor bearer. They came out of hiding. That was the gift that Jonathan gave to the Israel. Your courage can release other people from their fear. That's how we build one another's faith. And that's what happens here. It wasn't that Jonathan knew he didn't have enough to win the battle. But if he knew that he stepped out in courage with faith, God would show up, and God did. And when God showed up, it summoned the others to have courage for themselves. People can come out of hiding because of you. This could be the season when your courage will bring somebody back to the Lord. This might be the season where your uncle, where you this may be the season. They don't do you have to have the time, the courage, this may be the season that God is creating for us. You can summon those who feared failing or being defeated. You can re-enlist them back to the church. Maybe those of us who grew up going to Blue when we were younger. You guys were the Philistine basketball team at Blue, I remember. We were very afraid of the Georgia basketball team at Blue. You think back to those days in the 90s and early 2000s. This may be the season we re-enlist them back to the mission of God. Your acts of courage will summon others to their mission. What was Jesus' response to divine opportunity? What was Jesus' response to divine opportunity? The New Testament gives details of another humble leader. He wrestled with God just to obey and to climb a mountain to face an impossible enemy called death. And Jonathan's life was a shadow and a picture of Jesus' life. All of the Old Testament points to Jesus, including Jonathan's life. Jesus knew but Jesus never gave in. And like Jonathan, Jesus was not fearful of death. He knew that the destiny of God's people depended on his obedience. So when Jesus was crucified on the cross, it meant that he died for the Sauls like you and me. You and me are like Sauls. But he also died for the Philistines. Some of us, we're like Philistines. We're still enemies of God, enemies of God's people. For you and me, he died to change us from becoming like Sauls so that we can become like Jonathan. Actually, he died for us so that we would become less like the Philistines, those who were the enemies, and become more like him, Jesus. That's the reason why Jesus came. That's the reason why he died. To give us a new identity. You are no longer a Saul. In Jesus, you are no longer a Philistine. You are an armor bearer of Jesus. There's something about Jesus' life that you said, man, I am courageous because of Jesus. Let's go, Jesus. Your heart is my heart, Jesus. When you awaken to faith, you understand that Jesus is the courageous one. And you want to do the things that Jesus wants to do. You've been hiding for a long time. And there are those seasons that I want you to as we enter into this next chapter together, as Victory enters into a chapter of new leadership, the greatest example that we can give for one another and for our pastor and for this community is not to have expectations that are human expectations, but to have a humble heart. Of saying, God, whatever you want, however way you want to move, God. We hear your courage, Jesus. That resonates with our hearts. It is awakening us, Jesus. We want to do what you're doing.